warm welcoming to all of you who are on the platform this evening. I know you are excited for us to go into part two of what we discussed last week, because where we are is we're in a place now where we're trying to encourage and really, if necessary, force us all to embrace the high levels of technology that we really consume on a daily basis. Some of us, our phones are literally our brains in our hands. And it's one thing, I remember watching an interview with Jack Ma, who, you know, is the owner of Alibaba. And Jack Ma said, you know, if we as the consumers of machines and devices do not learn how to master the devices will master us. And unfortunately, I think we're going into that space of being mastered by our devices as opposed to being the master thereof. So sometimes, you know, experimentation, even though sometimes it may be costly, experimentation really is the mother of learning. And when you look back at us being young children, the way how we were able to crawl, the way how we sat up, the way how we walked, the way how we ran, you know, all of those formative things that we done, learned how to put food in our mouth. It was based upon, you know, watching our parents do these things and then trial and error. You know, I watch my daughter sometimes, the way how her son eats, you know, and he's learning to eat. And she has no problem with him making a total mess of himself, food in his hair, food all over himself, because he's a child and he's learning. And if he hits his mouth 3 times out of 10, and those are some good statistics. So I say all of that to say that we don't want to be the persons who just go out and buy expensive devices without even considering how these things function. Who made them? How did they make them? How much of their brain power are they using? What is their educational, you know, roadmap? How did they get to know these things? You know, because many of us are not real, you know, appreciators of mathematics. And sometimes we think mathematics is just numbers as opposed to, you know, the higher levels of mathematics, which are really what's behind these great devices that we use. So we're in a space now where we're really encouraging everybody, if necessarily want to force everybody into starting to look at the back end of the way how in which this world is working technologically. Because as we're here on Zoom today, you know, and live on Facebook, someone made $1 billion and pounds out of introducing Zoom and creating Zoom. And similarly, Mr. Zuckerberg made $1 billion, and not just him, many of those who were with him in the formative years of Facebook, which is now Meta. You know, so we want to get into that space and be able to start thinking on that kind of level. And if some of you think you're a little too old for this, but let's make sure that our children and our grandchildren start off on the educational road, learning things that will help them to be ready for the future when they graduate from university, when they graduate from college. I remember, you know, being taught that whenever you are going to teach something, you should always go to the heart of the matter. So when it comes to our children's education, we should start at the end of where we want them to be and then work back. Obviously, we don't want to superimpose on them our ambitions, but we should know whatever they want to do, they got to be technologically savvy. Even if they're going to be a footballer, they need to be technologically savvy. Because all of the footballers nowadays, you see, they check their heart rates, they determine how much ground they cover, and this is all through technology, okay? So technology is the way forward, and really the only way forward. The universe is governed technologically. So let us delve into part two of our subject matter in regards to learning the 8 fundamental scientific principles that we must consider in order to be a force in this 21st century. So today I have a very, very, very special guest with me, whose name is Brother Kimani Muhammad. And I was working on an app that was a social media app about 2 years ago with some colleagues. And the app was designed for us as Black people to have our own social media app outside of Facebook, outside of Twitter, and outside of all of these various things, Instagram, the like thereof. And as we were building it out, we were working more on the legal side of it and structuring the company to leverage up for IPO in 5 years. But when the brothers who were pretty much the owners of the company would come and we'd have weekly discussions, every week they would come and say, well, Kimani is working on, Brother Kimani is working on, and Brother Kimani is writing this program, he's writing that program. So he was putting all of the back end of the app together. And such a beautiful app. I wish we could have showcased it, Brother Kimani, today, but maybe you can speak a little bit about it as we go through our evening. So brothers and sisters, please welcome Brother Kimani Muhammad, who is a graduate of Jackson State University, Bachelor of Science in Computer Studies. He also worked as a research analyst for Jackson Public School District. He owned and operated CAK Computing and Technology from 2003 to 2006. He worked at the High Performance Visualization Center initiative at Jackson State University, developed interactive applications for virtual immersive environments. He has also worked with a team of 5 to develop a modified access grid node. To those of you who know the language of technology. Brother has also applied research laboratory at the Pennsylvania State University and conducted an experiment to study the psychological and physical effects of virtual reality use. Brother has also designed an interface in Microsoft Visual Basic Editor in ARC GIS for an image analysis system. Brother has also created illumination puzzle video game, and Brother has also created Explorers shuffle puzzle video game. So essentially, Brother has created Cat Hit mobile video game and created Poxy mobile video game, created these things. So please, spiritual injection, those of you on the line, take your devices off mute and let us welcome our wonderful brother Kimani Muhammad. Welcome to Spiritual Injection.
Brother Kimani.
Brother, thank you for coming.
Welcome.
Welcome, brother. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you for having me on. Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah. I think I want to start with a story of my own. Hearing the story about the childhood and parents with children who are exploring that technology. I was one of those children. I dismantled quite a few radios and other devices in my mother's house that she never screamed at me. So I never got in trouble, probably because I always put them back together. And that's how I started off young. I was tinkering around with devices. I was always fascinated. I think I got into computers because I used to watch it on television. Computers could do everything on television, right? So I was always fascinated by it. But one of the things that hindered myself and others like me in my community was the fact that we didn't have access to computers. There weren't people in my community that had computers. So what we ended up having to do was, every now and again, I'd go to a library or something and I'd see a little computer, I'd tinker around with it, but I couldn't do much. So I got into video games.
Yes.
I started playing video games because, it's like a small computer. And what ended up happening, this helped me out with my mother and my father with the video games and everything. In 1992, I participated in a video game contest. It was the Blockbuster World Video Game Championship. I won the competition here in my state, and then I went to the finals in Florida. And so as a part of that, it was an all expense paid trip to Florida for my mother. And she said, I'll never complain about your video games again. So that helped me out later on that was 1992. So in 1996, I made a petition to my mother to buy a computer. I told her, I said, I'd get a job to pay the payments if you just make the initial purchase on your credit. Yeah. So she got me the computer, I got a job, and 1996 is when I started programming. I started tinkering around on the internet, and I found out how to see the code on the back end of websites. And so I self-taught myself how to program websites by analyzing the HTML code in the background of websites back in 1996. From then on, and here's another important thing, I was determined to go into computers when I went to college.
Right.
I had a counselor who was advising me at the time, and he said my grades were good enough that I should go into biology and become a doctor. And if I had taken his advice, I would not enjoy what I'm doing today. Right. Because I really enjoy working with computers and programming and doing everything. So, what I would say is, if you know that this is something you love and you're determined to do it, don't let anybody deter you based on money. Right. Because I was being advised based on how much money I could potentially make as a doctor. Because the counselor told me, he said, what do you want to go into computers for? There's no money there. Computers are nothing. Because at this time, computers weren't as widespread as they are now. The internet was just starting to jump off. So he couldn't see what I saw. I was saying, computers are going to be the thing. And I was like, I want to do this. So I went to Jackson State University and I took the computer science courses. My goal when I got to Jackson State University was I wanted to learn every programming language that was available. And so as I went through Jackson State University, I took every programming course they had. And this gave me a foundation for what I'm doing today. And it made me capable to self-teach myself further along than what they taught me, because I was so adamant about learning the languages outside of just the prerequisites. Right. And so that's where I got my experience in the high visualization laboratory, working on what you would consider probably like the first generation virtual reality machines. They were not these nice headsets that they have today, which is amazing. But you had an entire room with wires and everything hanging on you. So it was amazing for me to be able to program and work on a sophisticated machine like that. And I ended up getting an internship at Penn State, working on the same type of machine, doing programs out there for them. And as I keep going further and further, I teach myself and enhance myself. And I started a company with a couple of my friends from Jackson State University. We started doing computer repair, websites, application development. And then come further up, I'm still doing that to this day. And so if anything, I tell you, especially with the children, one of the critical things that I think is having exposure, just being able to access it. Because I was just adamant enough to beg my mother for a computer. I don't know where I would be if I had not gotten that computer, being that I, wanted to get into technology. And other people wanted to shift me into, like I said, medicine. Then there were other people that wanted to shift me into music, because I also played the trumpet in high school. But I would have just gone with the flow. Right. And I never would be where I am enjoying myself.
Fantastic, fantastic. So tell us, where are you now professionally? What is your day look like?
Oh, where I am now, I left the school district in 2019 to become an independent contractor, doing work. So right now, I do various amounts of systems. So you spoke about Cine. Cine was one of those projects that I did where I developed a mobile app for the Android and the iOS platforms. Some of the features in Cine are, of course, the social media networking portion, uploading videos. It also has a live streaming component. It's not public yet, but it's a live streaming component. And I set up the whole infrastructure for it. So I broadened my reach into getting into these enterprise level backends because, I'm not going to put a limitation on myself. Right? I'm going to jump into it full on and learn these things, because one of the things I learned throughout my experience is that people will try to make it difficult for you by, using terminology. They try to confuse you with the terminology. They try to confuse you with, just making it seem like it's so big and beyond your reach. Especially nowadays, everything is within reach. I mean, the access is there now. I remember, as you stated, I've created a couple of small video games. Years ago, I was looking to get into some video game development while I was in college. And I took a look at the price of this development engine called the Unreal Engine. And I think it was like maybe $20,000. Right. And as a college student, I'm like, I don't have $20,000. There's no way. But now, today, in 2022, the Unreal Engine is free. So you can download it and make your video games free of charge. And that is amazing to live in a day and a time where the barriers are nearly gone as far as stepping into technology. It's been made accessible for everyone. So that's where I am right now. I'm deep into the bigger data systems, mobile app development. I'm still doing a lot of web development, but I do more so larger systems dealing with, enterprise level type institutions.